switch focus now and think about challenger banks and the ways they have utilized technology to make real inroads into the financial sector. And I'm going to hand the reins of moderation over to a man much better qualified than me to dig into what the challenger banks have achieved and what their future might look like. He is, and I'm delighted to welcome him, Anthony Thompson. Now, Anthony has a fascinating backstory. He began his life in marketing, but he became more and more convinced that as he looked at the sort of old school banking sector, that it really wasn't working for many, many people, and that he could see ways in which a different kind of banking could work so much better. He came up with some great ideas. He established Metro Bank in the UK, which was the first really significant new bank in the country in more than a century. He's since established Atom Bank, which is specifically designed for mobile, and that has taken off too. He's branched out. He's gone into Australia, where he's been behind the smart bank known as 86400. So he's got a whole heap of experience in this notion of challenger banks and challenging the status quo in the financial sector. So Anthony, I'm delighted to hand over to you and for you to lead this discussion, and welcome to you.
Thanks, Stephen, and hello everyone. As Stephen says, I'm Anthony Thompson, and as he alluded to, having previously founded and chaired two other challenger banks, this session is of great personal interest to me. Today I'm delighted to be here to chair this session looking at the future for challenger banks. Of course, COVID-19 has transformed the way many customers interact with their banks around the world, and many would argue digital banking has now come of age. To discuss this topic, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEOs of three of the world's leading challenger banks. Mohammed Al-Mouraj, who is the CEO of ELA Bank in Bahrain, Robert Bell, the Chief Executive of 86400 in Australia, and Dennis Guven, Chief Executive of MOX, which is Standard Chartered's new digital bank based in Hong Kong. Now, however you define them, neobanks or challenger banks or whatever, they are here to stay. Some, like ELA and MOX, were created by existing banks. Others, like 86400, were established independently to take on the big banks. Challengers are on every continent, and they are making huge inroads into traditional banking markets. So let's start by asking our distinguished panel about the opportunities and challenges they see facing them. Mohammed, if I can start with you, digital banking has the opportunity to enable much greater financial inclusion. But what do you see as the purpose of challenger banks? Are they about serving a broader purpose in society, or is it just about creating shareholder value? Mohammed.
Thank you, Anthony, for that introduction. Quite delighted to be here with you and my fellow panelists, Denise and Robert. I think the easiest answer to the first question that you had on our purpose would be we're here to make the lives of the incumbent banks a little bit more difficult and to eat from their lunches. But I think, Anthony, in every industry, when you see these certain trends, you can definitely assume that there is space for new players to enter the market. So the first one that I definitely think that has created an opening for us as challenger banks is there was a complete mismatch between what the customers were demanding and what the banks or the traditional banks were offering to their customers. If a customer right now can consume in his everyday life his grocery needs, his telecom needs, his entertainment needs, all by a press of a button from an app, why couldn't the traditional banks offer that? That's one. Number two, the consumers were asking for more customization, more variety at a lot cheaper prices than what the traditional banks were offering. Three, I think shareholders, owners in general, were demanding a lot more returns from their traditional banks. However, the traditional banks could not offer these returns because of their, I call them traditional model in terms of the way they did banking, the way they offered it, and their cost bases. Fourth, regulators in general were demanding a lot more from banks in order for them to bring a huge unbanked or underserved population in several countries, especially in developing markets. And fourth, there were opportunities for many banks, especially us challenger banks, for basically to attract new customer bases. And I think that's a good segue to your following question, which is the sole purpose for us to make profits, or the sole purpose for us to serve a more broader social purpose? But I think it's not necessarily black and white all the time. I look, for example, at the purpose of ILA, which you'll see that both the social purpose and the profit purpose are quite intertwined and complementary. So let me start off with, I think, what we see as certain models that are for profit in the challenger bank industry. I think based on what I'm seeing, a trend mainly in developing markets, these are probably most because of the ownership structure. They've got private investors, hedge funds, private equity investors that are demanding returns, and that's because of that are driving challenger banks to be more profit oriented. But then I look at examples more around developing countries or developing economies such as ILA Bank, and I think it's a great example where both these purposes go hand in hand and are quite complementary. ILA, when it was consummated a few years back under the mother company, Arab Banking Corporation, I think Bank ABC in its legacy and history has always been a pioneering bank in our region, the Middle East, for the last 40 years, bringing new technologies and opening up doors for new countries in the Middle East for financial services and banking needs. And I think one of the things that as a senior management at Bank ABC and a board level, they decided that ILA was going to be serving two purposes, which was definitely creating value for our shareholders and also bringing the best-in-class banking services for the region and creating opportunities for the underserved and the underbanked, as we call them, to come online through digital means and banking services embodied by ILA. So I just look at my daily kind of day-to-day day as a CEO. I think these two things, which are I need to create value for my stakeholders, which are Bank ABC, are definitely there. But at the same time, I also have demands from the regulator, from my board, and also from the community to make sure that we create services and banking needs that are catered towards the underserved and those, let's say, that don't have access to banking needs.
Okay, Mohammed, thank you for that. Deniz, I'd like to ask you the same question. Mohammed talked about a growing market with a vastly underserved population in the Middle East. Same issues, I suspect, in Hong Kong. You're from a big bank background. Is your focus on purpose or is it on profit?
Thank you, Anthony. First of all, I have to say something. We launched the bank 2 months ago, 62 days ago. And before that, we were in beta, etc. In the last 62 days, we are open to everyone. We just reached 50,000 customers yesterday. I think these are super important. But as you asked to me, Deniz, what is your purpose? Is it profitability? Is it the numbers that you are sharing right now? I think no, because let me explain why we are doing this. Why this is super important. For Standard Chartered Group entirely. I think I have to share this. First of all, we started with a lot of pain points in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, as many people know that Hong Kong is one of the most profitable banking market in the world. However, there are a lot of pain points and underserved customers in Hong Kong, and this was the biggest problem. We identified 87 different pain points in Hong Kong to almost 550 days ago, and we started to do this. In 510 days time, we launched the bank, and today bank is backed by Standard Chartered Group, but at the same time we sold 35% of the company to a telecom company also a digital travel company, Trip.com and Hong Kong Telecom. So these are super important for us. Our main purpose right now as a bank, as a neobank, because as you stated, I think people, they want to understand, what is this challenger bank, fintech, neobank or something. This is a new operating model, and we are a neobank in Hong Kong. I think this is the most important thing, and this operating model, it's going to be our future operating model. And what we want to do, we want to get the highest hard share instead of market share, because especially for this kind of new businesses, if you can get the highest hard share, then you can get the market share. For example, in the last 60 days, when I look at app stores or let's say Google Play and everything, we got 4.8 stars with more than thousands and thousands comments. If you are getting this kind of attraction from your customers, if your customers, I think that was super important for us. If you see your customers that they post your app or your card on social media, I think that's the most important thing for the beginning. This means you are solving some issues and the pain points in that market. But in the future, of course, we are a bank, we have to focus on profitability. There should be a way to path to profitability, but this is something we have to look at this as a marathon, not like sprint.
Is it harder, Deniz, to have that focus when you have a broader shareholder base with as you say, two other substantial shareholders? Are they not pushing you more towards profit than purpose?
Anthony, I think we are lucky. In our board, Hong Kong Telecom CEO is sitting there, C-Trip CEO sitting there. Also, we got people from Standard Chartered. Starting from day one, I think we got the support from Standard Chartered, also from other shareholders, that we are using, we are building this separately, independently. I'm using 0% technology from Standard Chartered. I'm using competence and some experience from Standard Chartered or Hong Kong Telecom. But other than that, this is a new bank, new tech stack, new brand, new culture. Everything is new. Of course, there are some different expectations from different shareholders, which is very normal, and that's my job, I think, to manage all these things. But so far, I think everybody is so aligned, and they are super happy with the numbers and the progress. What we have to do, I think we have to show the way how we are going to scale up and create the profitability path, scale path, and everything. If you can share all these things with the shareholders, if you can involve them into your business, I think it's not like a traditional bank. They allow you to do a lot of different things.
Okay, Deniz, thank you for that. Rob, Australia, I know, has managed the COVID pandemic very, very well, but nonetheless, around the world, we're seeing digital banking accelerated due to the pandemic. What do you see as the key challenges and opportunities and threats facing 86400 as a challenger bank over the next couple of years?
Thanks, AT. Look, the opportunities are actually huge. Before COVID-19, we were very focused on technology and delivering things at a faster pace. So we actually have a delivery cycle of every 2 weeks, we release new features, new benefits. And to give you sort of the contrast to the large incumbent banks here in Australia, they might offer a new feature or an update every 6 months or every year. So we're working on this fortnightly cycle. So we were already moving very, very quickly. And we already had a very large market in Australia to serve. People are already using their phones, as they are all around the world, to do all sorts of things. They run their lives on their phones. What COVID-19 has done is actually accelerated the adoption of digital. And so people that were perhaps a little bit reluctant to make payments by tapping their phone or using a mobile device have actually had to do that. So it's been a big tailwind for us. And we've been able to operate exactly like we were before COVID, during COVID. In fact, we've actually accelerated our uplift in customers because we have digital ID, because we have straight through processing, because it takes only 2 minutes to open an account and you can make payments within seconds. That's been a huge advantage to us. So COVID-19, as devastating as it has been to the broader community, it's actually been a positive for us in terms of acquiring new customers. In terms of challenges, look, the biggest challenge we have is there are just so many opportunities in banking. The temptation is to try and do everything at once. And the big challenge for us is just to stay true to 2 or 3 key products and really make that experience, the product, the experience and the service better than anything else in the market, and to really leverage our technology, which is so far ahead of anyone else in the market. And so that challenge is just being really focused. There is just so much opportunities that it's sometimes tempting to go and change everything in banking, because quite frankly, there is so much in banking that needs to be fixed.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. Denise, if I come to you, I'm going to ask each of you very quickly, in fact, in 30 seconds, to sum up what you see as the biggest challenge facing the challenges in general and the biggest challenge facing you. Denise, if I can start with you.
I think biggest challenge for Mox and myself, actually, finding the talents. This is some sort of a new industry, and we are using a lot of new technologies, and we are using a lot of new services. Mox Bank is a service-led bank, Anthony. It's not a product-led bank, because I don't believe that product-led banks will survive. So that's why finding the right mindset to create services to solve the pain points, it's super difficult. Also finding the technologists, especially in Hong Kong area, it was quite difficult for us. We found a lot of people from outside. We brought them to Hong Kong, but still talent is the most important thing and challenging.
That's great. Thanks, Denise. Rob, similarly, very quickly, 30 seconds, the biggest challenge you see facing challenges in general and the biggest challenge you see facing you in particular.
Look, I think in general, I would say the biggest challenge of digital banks is to actually get to break even and to generate revenue. It's not enough just to acquire very large amounts of customers and expect to sometime in the future capitalize on. So the biggest challenge is reaching that profitability. That's why 86400 effectively launched on day one with transactions accounts, savings accounts, and home loans right from the start. So we'd have a revenue source. And I think then the next biggest challenge for challenger banks, and for us, of course, is that requires capital. Banking is capital intensive, and you need to continue to add capital on that pathway to profitability.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Mohammed, in 30 seconds, the biggest challenge
for me,
ELA, I think,
just to add on one
successful to date. What's the biggest challenge facing you in general, you think, challenger banks and you in particular?
I think 2 things mainly for challenger banks and myself here at ILA. With challenger banks, I see the difficulty of maintaining that momentum and speed that Robert and Denise spoke about, in order to maintain with the trend of what customers are demanding and ensuring that we meet their expectations on customer experience. Because as you can see, there are other people that are entering the market, such as telecoms, such as even payment providers are now trying to offer banking services. The technology companies are trying to offer banking services. So that momentum and that speed of delivery needs to be maintained. And that's obviously a challenge for us. Secondly, for me personally at ILA, I have a mandate to expand geographically throughout the Middle East. And what I'm starting to see is the, let's call it, non-centralized regulatory environment catered towards fintechs and digital banks are causing, let's say, a bit of a challenge for us to expand geographically at the speed that we would like and is demanded by our stakeholders.